glad to have you here today, beautiful writers. Welcome to the Writers Bridge. And we are a bi-weekly platform building chat, always free, always on alternate Tuesdays. And yes, there is always a recording. We have just enabled our live transcription function. If you want to see the subtitles and you can't, use those three dots at the bottom of your screen. That's also where you can hide the subtitles if you would like to not see the subtitles, but those will go. And I would say they're about 95% accurate and very, very useful for anyone who needs subtitles or people who just like them to support their listening experience. We call ourselves the Writer's Bridge because we are all about platform building, and yet a platform is a thing that you stand up on and yell at people from, whereas a bridge is a two-way street between you and your readers where you communicate with them and they communicate right back with you. We have a really fantastic episode that we are so excited about today. And before we start, we just want to mention that we also have the Express Lane, which is our membership newsletter. And our members have been working on their tiny platform building bites. In the past couple of weeks, we've been working on monetizing video content, using Instagram stories as a way to test your writing material, looking at our work as more literary or more commercial, how that affects our platform building. And if you want to jump in on that, feel free to check us out at thewritersbridge.com/expresslane. Ashley, take us into today's episode.
Hi, everybody. I'm trying to, Allison, if you could add, no, got it right here, just adding spotlights for our guests. Welcome, welcome. Today, we want to hear from Adiba, Tanya, Michelle, and Elsie. Elsie is going to be our moderator, helping us learn more about the paths to publishing, the paths to growing platform for BIPOC and AAPI writers, and also the roadblocks, the obstacles, the hurdles that writers in a minority have to face, and the things that we can do to try to create opportunities, try to amplify, and to try to make our writing spaces more diverse.
And champion marginalized voices and why that is going to make a better writing and literary space for all of us. Our guest moderator, Elsie Deshay, is an author building her own platform, and she's going to be asking our panelists, Tanya Todd, Michelle Yang, and Adiba Nelson, about their experiences, their advice, how the literary community as a whole can actively create safer and more welcoming spaces. Let's introduce them. Author and actress Tanya Todd, give us a little wave, is the host of the 52 Love podcast. She is invested in own voices writing, champions diverse representation, and marginalized artists in the literary and cinematic worlds. Welcome, Tanya. Michelle Yang is an advocate whose writings on the intersection of Asian American identity, body image, and mental health have been featured in NBC News, CNN, InStyle, and more. Her memoir is forthcoming, and it is called Phoenix Girl, How a Fat Asian with Bipolar Found Love, which I think just sounds amazing. Welcome, Michelle. Adiba Nelson is an author, screenwriter, performer, disability rights advocate, and the subject of the Emmy Award-winning documentary, The Full Nelson. She wrote and self-published her first children's book, Meet Clarabelle Blue, in 2013, and her memoir, Ain't That a Mother, is coming out this year, and it's available for pre-order from Blackstone. And our guest moderator, Elsie Deshay, is a professional in reproductive psychosociology. She has dedicated her time to research in high-risk areas and now concentrates on the work of intersectional needs of femmes in high-stress circumstances. And with that, Elsie, let's turn it over to you. Take it away for us.
Hello, everybody. Well, I am really excited to be here. I don't want to take up a lot of time, though. We've already had our introduction. So I just want to go over how we are going to structure everything. We had some really, really thoughtful questions come in ahead of this event. And so I'm going to do my best to, and if I seem like I'm speaking slowly, I'm also watching the transcription. You'll see I've got some interesting, super bulky headgear going on. This is a special Bluetooth for people who have sensorineural hearing issues, which is me. So if you see my eyes going up and down the screen, I'm just making sure I'm speaking at a pace that can be understood for the transcription's sake. But yes, we have some really thoughtful questions come in. And so initially the questions that we created, we were going to have all of the panelists answer my questions, that is, which are the introductory inspirational questions, but so that we can highlight the desired content that people want to see discussed, I'm going to spread out the questions between the different participants. And then after that, we'll go into the application portion, meaning like applied concepts of how do we move towards progress, if that makes sense. I'm not going to be paying a lot of attention to the chat unless I'm being directly messaged by Allison or Ashley. That does not mean that your input is not important. Someone else is just going to be paying attention to. So if there's something going on, or if you're having issues, or someone can't be heard, or you've just had like some amazing epiphany that you want to be added, please know that it'll get to me as soon as it goes through them, and we welcome all of your input. Hello to Tanya and Adiba and Michelle. We spread the questions out between you all. And also, feel free to pass if you'd rather answer a different one, because some of these might involve personal things that you may not be in a place that you want to share, and we're totally fine. We're flexible. So I am going to start with the first question, which is, what do you think are the largest obstacles specific to Black and Indigenous or people of color femmes on creating momentum in the field? And examples can be systemically, personally, or anything in between those two. And I'm going to throw this question out there since we're kind of doing a very blunt icebreaker instead of assigning it, and then we'll move on to the next person after that. Any takers?
I can jump in, and
Michelle,
other people can feel free to add. I think the obvious is obvious first obstacle to having more writers in the field, and why there aren't more BIPOC writers, is financial. I think it's kind of a luxury to be able to write, especially I wrote a memoir, being a memoir like myself, because you need a level of privilege, and I think that should be acknowledged, because if you're trying to pay for your living situation and trying to feed your children, writing is not something that's going to like immediately pay off for most people. And right. So unless you're independently well off or have family sponsorship of some kind, it's really impossible. You need, a foundation to build off of. And that's where the BIPOC community is often at a disadvantage.
I think that's a wonderful place to start. And I know, so my writing background is mostly clinical, and also I said I'm in tech, so I do content. And I love writing, but I'm writing in that space, not because I don't love it and not because it's not important, but like, I haven't finished my memoir. I haven't finished my novel because like, you can't eat on borrowed time, as a friend of mine says. So I think that's a really great place to start. Anything else you want to add about how that intersects with your own personal journey?
Yeah, I mean, and then when you do build up enough resources to write, because I immigrated when I was 9. I worked in my parents' small takeout restaurant. My parents still run a restaurant, and even that is a level of privilege. But I went through school and build up a corporate career and build up enough of a nest egg before I felt brave enough to dive into my writing, right? And so that's what I did. But even once I got there and once I finished my writing, that's when you then hit the systemic wall of trying to get your piece of writing out into the world, right? I don't know how many people have seen the news recently about the movie Turning Red that just came out, where Cinema Blend, a managing director there, wrote a horrifyingly privileged, narrow review about it, saying that it is absolutely not relatable, and it's because it's
Wasn't he void of melanin?
Yeah. And the story is about, a Chinese Canadian in Toronto, right? And so he's like,
it wasn't
this is so unreliable or unrelatable.
Right.
It's too specific that no one would get it, and that's the kind of thing that I continue to run across. My book is currently out on submission with an agent, so I've gotten really far, but there is a lot. The feedback that we get a lot is they don't connect with the material, and so that I think that is part of what is systemic.
Despite the fact that we've been supposed to connect with the material for people who aren't like us for years.
That part.
I'm sorry, Tanya, can you repeat what you said?
I said, despite the fact that we've been expected to relate to materials that have nothing to do with people who look or sound like us for years,
Absolutely.
For decades, for centuries.
Absolutely. And there's a hilarious tweet that somebody wrote about this clown that it's like, apparently he found a rat controlling central nervous system perfectly, relatable, talking about Ratatouille, the Pixar movie, but an Asian woman, an Asian girl is like too unrelatable,
Well, seems like a bit of a confession, but here we are.
To piggyback on what Michelle and Tanya both said, when I was trying to pitch my children's book, which is about a little Black girl with a disability, I was told that it was too niche. And I was like, well, I'm not so sure what's so niche about a Black disabled person. Like, we're here, like we exist in this world. Nothing about a human being existing in this world is niche.
It's niche, right.
When it's not.
I think what disturbs me the most about that, as a Black disabled woman, this is not my only disability, this is actually like a product of an additional disability because I have a genetic disorder also, is that why do you need to relate to something for it to be important? And that in and of itself is like it's a pillar of Eurocentrism. Unless it is something that I'm experiencing in my everyday life, then it is not a priority. Like, not just not for me a priority, it is not a priority for society, and it should not be. And the message that that's sending, especially in a children's book, that for your children and the children who are being raised, that they shouldn't consider other people going through any various experiences that differ from their own should be invisible, or that their experiences should disappear because they aren't yours, is fairly violent, really, when you really think about it. Mm-hmm. So I would love to hear more about your thoughts on that, especially yay, children's books. That's also, I feel like that's the niche part, like not the disability part. Everybody should. You know what I'm saying?
I think that thinking is the main barrier to building our platforms, right? When people see us as other, or if we don't fit the box that they think we're supposed to fit into because we look a certain way, then how do you live online, right? How do you build that platform? How do you get the followers? And for me, I literally, I just rely on my word. I'm trying to do reels. I'm not good at it. I can't do all the TikTok dances, and I can't do all the where you're mouthing the words to whatever is being I just can't do it. I'm not good at it. I'm not. And so if you don't do all those things and you can't follow along with this, or that building of a platform is automatically, you have to work that much harder to try and bring people to where you are. So you're writing extra hard. You're putting your work out there, but then on the other side, you have people who are accusing you of, whatchamacallit, clout chasing, or putting yourself first, or so it's almost like a no-win situation.
Build on what Tanya said, and that I ask us all, I challenge everyone to challenge the thought that the white experience is automatically universal, right? Accepted as universal, and anything not white is specific and niche, to challenge
white
that
and straight.
Belief. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's Tanya. I'm going to start with you next. So I hope,
okay.
I hope you're ready for that. Going to pass the baton. I think it's a wonderful place to stop. And I see how it relates to the clout chasing that Adiba was bringing up as a concern. And how do you define success as a writer? And when you're answering that question, in what ways do you think reaching and maintaining or living with your successes differ from the non-melanated experience? I'm trying to be helpful. Because of the intersectional portions of your identity or identities, however, and whatever part you want to talk about or not talk about, please feel free.
For me, success means connecting with my audience on an emotional level. There's room for growth at any level, but you can succeed with one engaged reader. So I feel like in some regards, I'm already a success, but you can build on that success and grow it to a larger degree. But to your second part, not all marginalized qualities are visible. Some are invisible, some are ambiguous. You can see that I'm a woman, but at times I feel pressure to prove that I belong in certain conversations due to other people's presumptions about my ethnicity or my sexuality. Like, people often just have no idea where I belong, and so they make their own assumptions. And it's like, well, why do you get a say in this? What even are you?
I love that.
Adiba, I see you melanating. I see you marinating on an idea. Please bring it forth.
I am melanating and marinating and all
marinating. I'm glad you caught it. You knew what I was saying.
Yes. No, well, so I love that Tanya speaks to when people say, why do you even have a say in this conversation? Because on the surface, I present as just a Black woman, but people don't know about me unless you've read an article that I've written where I've talked about it, or you know me personally, is that I'm half Puerto Rican and I speak Spanish fluently. And so when I chime in on things that also relate to the Latin community, sometimes people are like, well, how do you know? I'm like, because I was raised in this community. I know this culture inside and out. To an extent,
it's a whole stay in your lane mentality when you don't know what my lane is.
Right. Like, you don't know my lane. And so it was just this year that I actually got to start writing for Parents Latina. But I remember, when Parents Latina first came out, I never saw writers that looked like me. And even still today in media as a whole, you don't see dark-skinned Afro-Latinas. You see the J-Los, you see, the Thalias, the
Zoe Saldana is about as dark as it gets. You already know. I'm just saying.
I could go on and on.
Gina Torres, she's a little darker. Gina Torres is darker.
Right.
Just a teeny. People still question her though.
Right, but you don't see like dark-skinned brown women. But just this last month, I was able to interview Amara La Negra, who burst onto the scene through Love and Hip Hop Love and Hip Hop Miami. And she is a very proud, very dark-skinned Latin woman. And she owns it and she wears it. And
can I just also say, I think she's one of the prettiest women in the world, and you all don't have to join me in that. And I think specifically the fact that she, featurism is a whole different conversation, although it's incredibly related to the intersectional Latinx, Caribbean, South American portion. But I love her representation. And when you think about the amount of the diaspora that is integrated into Latin American history and how much they don't see themselves, she's just like this tiny tip of the iceberg to me, of the foundation of what the Latin experience is outside of Telemundo.
Right.
So I am such a huge fan of hers. It must have been lovely to interview her.
It was. We were saying how wonderful it was to be one dark-skinned Afro-Latina interviewing another dark-skinned Afro-Latina, which we don't see. But to Tanya's point of, you don't know what my lane is, so I'm not gonna, you can't pigeonhole me. And I think when it comes to building platforms, people want to pigeonhole you as just this or just that. You fit into this, you are square, so you fit into the square hole. And it's like, no, I'm actually pretty malleable. I can pretty much fit anywhere I want to go. So I love that you said that you brought that up of not people assuming that you can only be this one thing.
Well, that is lovely. I'm just soaking in all of the intellectual diversity of this conversation. It's relatable as well. And even necesitamos charlar después. I did not know that you were. So I am born and bred from the United States, but all my relatives range from Guatemala to Puerto Rico. So I was raised hearing Spanish in the home and went to school in East LA speaking Spanish my whole life. And I've done a fair amount of work in the Caribbean. So I'm always so happy. Like, I don't know that I'm in the place where I claim being Black and Latinx, because I feel like that requires, I don't know, a certain level of authenticity. Like, these are my aunts and uncles, not necessarily my parents, you know? It's very horizontal for me. It's not vertical, but it's still a part of my community experience. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I love meeting other people who can help me, as you said, marinate in that. It's lovely. Tanya, I'm gonna come back and pick on you because you've been brief in your words, so I'm gonna continually circle back to you. I know you're right over there somewhere. This is something that we've touched on, and anybody can. Everybody's spoken at this point, so feel free to dive in. Michelle, I think I don't know if it was Michelle or Adiba, you both mentioned it. I don't remember who was the first one. But what do you think about having an intentional niche as a writer? And how does it present either opportunities or challenges that are specific to the BIPOC femme experience? So this is building on.
I think it was Adiba who mentioned us feeling pigeonholed. Like we can feel pigeonholed into categories that we wouldn't choose for ourselves. And having a niche can make the box that you're in feel even smaller, but it can also empower you by allowing you to claim your space. So there are opportunities there.
That's awesome. Tanya, sorry, Elsie, because we had a question in the chat that was related to that. Tanya, can you give us some examples of where that has been, where the niche
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
There we go. Yeah, great.
There you go.
Yeah, has been just like a launch pad. Where has the niche been a launch pad? And where has it restricted? And is it when you get to decide your own box that you want to step into? You know, is that the difference when you get to self-identify, like, this is my area of specialty, or this is the area I'm going to focus on right now?
I think it's different for everyone, but I've had examples of both. One of my niches is talking about this. You know, I didn't want my racial identity to have anything to do with building platform or my writing career, but I was not able to escape it. Like, I was not able to query without mentioning it. When I started, I didn't mention that I was an Own Voices writer because I thought that my words should stand on their own and my story should stand on their own. But I began getting pushback. Like, I had to prove that I was an authority to write this subject. And then I would get white agents telling me, well, your Black characters don't speak authentically Black. Excuse me? You know, like, how can you tell me how a Black person talks when...
Well, we're going to make that its own separate question. That's circling back to Michelle's introduction.
But because I keep getting, pushed in this direction, I've been able to help others with this. I've been able to learn more about it and spread the knowledge that I'm gaining and assist others with their journeys. So that's a box that I was pushed into. But separately, because I'm an actor also, I've been able to use my work on screen and my work also writing for film to help to speak at writing conferences and use that experience. That's my niche. That's not something that everyone in the community has. So I'm able to bring those things together and capitalize on that. So that's one that I chose for myself.
Tanya.
It's either Adiba, I think Adiba's already ready, but Adiba.
I've been running my mouth. I'm gonna let Michelle take it, and then I'll say what I need to say.
I would love to hear about this from both of you, though, because the concept of, Michelle introduced this so beautifully. So the concept of Eurocentrism as a critical eye into your work. I think this is really relevant to talking about having a niche, this concept of like, to what extent do those of us who present as clearly alternate to anything Eurocentric, to anything, I'm just going to be super blunt, to anything colonized, anything that's been the forced standard, you know, within the societies that we're in. What is your experience and your frustrations, and more importantly, how do you cope with and overcome having the Eurocentric eye as a criticism, in a position of power to critique you building your own specialties? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So for me, early on, when I first started writing, I established that my scope would be mental health, because the whole reason I started writing was because I wanted to advocate. I live with bipolar disorder, and I hid it for 20 years. And so I know how lonely that felt. And the reason I started sharing my story was I wanted to fight that stigma so that, you know, others would not feel so alone. So, but, you know, the buckets was like mental health, body image, feminism, and Asian American identity. You know, my identity as an immigrant, like those are that's the intersection that I can't really separate, right? And that's all what I am about. And it's really helped me dial in what I want to write about. You know, when opportunities come up, how do I distill them? And because it can be overwhelming if you're like, oh, do I have to speak about everything? Do I have to write about everything? You know, so it served me well in that regard. But, you know, the niche part of it, you know, it's the thing
I think the niche part of it, and also being edited by someone who, you know, comes from so you all are going to hear me using terms that you might not have heard being phrased. And that's something we can probably have a completely different discussion on later. Someone just asked about following people on social media. My social media page deals with people of color and Indigenous people defining our own terms. And so I do things like replace dominant culture with domineering culture. And as writers, we understand the difference, and it's very intentional. So I was about to ask you, Michelle, how does it feel trying to represent all of those things in your writing, knowing that you were going to be like the gatekeeping, to be honest, might be coming from somebody editing who is from a domineering culture? You know, how does that affect you?
I mean, it's extremely difficult. Actually, my first publication, it was in HuffPost, my first piece ever published, and it became a huge controversy. There was a Twitter war because the editors put in a subtitle that said, "My Asian parents and culture." It took me years to overcome the pain caused by my Asian parents and culture. That's what they wrote in. And that was not my words. That was not what my story was about. It was my coming out story about, you know, I'm sorry, I don't want to misuse the term, but my first time disclosing that publicly that I live with bipolar disorder. And I felt so powerless. You know, this was my first
traumatizing.
Yeah, it was so extremely traumatizing. I didn't sleep for a week. And if anybody lives with a mental health condition, like not sleeping is a big deal. And luckily other mentors, people in the binders community took up my fight and started the Twitter war for me. And like Roxanne Gay retweeted my fight to try to get HuffPost to change it. And, you know, Alexander Chi and all these big name writers came to my aid, and I was able to have HuffPost change that. But, so I was like, that was pivotal to my writing career, right? It set me on a track record that I can fight back. I can take back my voice. I can, even no matter how big the publication, you have some control over, you know, your voice. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't get paid, you know, $150, $200 at the time for that piece so that you can use my name and put words in my mouth, right? Not in that way. Like, this is my brand, my identity is all I have. And I was infuriated, right? Like, I mean,
it goes beyond that though. And I think that's something that any culture that it does not come from, that doesn't have additional ethnic intersection. I'm just thinking myself, and I remember this happening now. Like, I remember watching that Twitter war, and I was putting myself in your position, like, think about the impact that has on our families, like from a communal standpoint, like literally you personally as a, did we lose her?
No, I'm here. But it's not over. All the time, I still have to fight that. Like, there's such a tendency in the media to trying to vilify Asian parents, and it's I always, I think BIPOC writers always have to fight to keep the nuance in the story, right? To prove that we're full of dimensional, which is not something white writers have to do. And that is incredibly unfair, right?
So to speak to what Michelle said, and Ashley had put a little comment or a question, I think, in the chat about me putting boundaries on editors, and I do. And I don't know if that's appropriate, but I do it because it's my work, it's my name, like Michelle said, it's our brand. And so I'm very clear, like when I was writing my memoir. So when I write, a lot of times I write like I'm speaking to my girlfriends, right? And so my memoir is very much like that book that you would equate to a conversation with your girl. And you're like, girl, I'm coming over, get the wine ready, get the nachos, because I got a story for you. That's the equivalent of my book. And when it came time to edit my book, I knew damn well, sorry if I'm not supposed to curse, but I did, sorry.
I don't think that they have those restrictions here. No
I made
censorship.
it very clear that I needed a Black editor to edit my Black woman written book. And there was a question, I was like, well, why? I'm like, well, because my experiences as an Afro-Latin woman are unique to me. And I'm not going to have to justify them or verify them with someone who hasn't lived even something close to my experience. And the response I got was, well, we don't have any Black editors. It's like, well, here's a list.
Yeah.
Here are some Black editors for you. This is my first choice, and these are the other ones, and please choose someone from this list. And they interviewed them, and I got my first choice. But it took me saying, this is what I require as a writer. This is my name. This is my brand. This is my work. And even there were even some parts, and God, I love my editor, Kelly Glass. She is now the executive editor of Kindred.
I was hoping you were gonna mention her name. She's a social media friend of mine, and she is glorious.
She's a goddess. She is
the field, yes.
The end all be all. And she was my editor for my memoir. And there were some parts in the memoir where I had gone into like explaining certain things, because I understand that a large majority of my audience is white. And so, I want people to understand what they're reading. And so I would put descriptions or explanations, and Kelly was just like, nope, there's this thing called Google. We're taking out this explanation. If they don't understand, they can use it. Like, we are unapologetically Black. She's like, you are unapologetically Black. You are unapologetically Latin. We're taking it out. And I needed that because it's one thing to walk through this world as a woman of color. It's another thing to be held and amplified by women of color.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we don't love y'all, white ladies. We love you so much. Thank you. But it's something to get that okay from your own community, that pat on the back that it's good, girl, you did it. To get that, what's the word? There's a certain word I'm looking for.
Validation.
Validation, edification, absolutely.
Yeah.
All those things. And so I think in our writing fields, as we build our brand, as we build our platforms, you need to have that other voice in the room. And someone asked in the chat, what can we as white writers do to amplify Black voices or BIPOC voices, or something was the question. Say our names, put our names in the room, like get to know us, follow us, retweet our things.
Right. And
if you see something like what happened to Michelle Morgan,
for Black
be one of the people who speak up against that.
Right.
Voice that this is wrong and should not be happening. Don't make her be the only one fighting this battle.
And I've often heard from white people, like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. You know what? Say the wrong thing. Because when you say the wrong thing, then you learn what the right thing is to say. But
absolutely.
say our names. Don't be afraid to like go against what your friends may think or what will my pastor think. Like, it's okay. God will forgive you if you're wrong. Like, it's cool. But just, put us in the room, say our names, refer us for, this job, that job. Retweet our stuff, share our stuff on Facebook, share it on Instagram. That's how you can support and amplify and be an ally, and in some places even be an accomplice, because we're going to need those too.
Yep. I love that. That is a perfect way to end. Michelle and Tanya, I'm going to circle back to you all. What would you say are your most triumphant or most difficult moments that defined your career thus far? And how is that affected by your current identity and future goals? You started talking about this, and I felt like there was perhaps more in you. And if there isn't, that's okay. But if there is, you can start the response to that question. And then Tanya, if you can take us away, that would be great. And then we're going to move on to some of the audience questions that Ashley sent me earlier. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Elsie. Yeah, I mean, the HuffPost experience was one of those triumphant and most difficult moments. I honestly feel like if the writer community didn't help take up, the march with me, I could have quit writing right there. And that was my first byline, and so that was an incredible experience. And it really opened a lot of doors because overnight everybody knew my name. All the editors knew who I was. And the ones who wanted to be fair and advocate on behalf, make room for BIPOC writers, then we're open to my pitches, more. Another moment that was most difficult, and I guess, it was the Atlanta shootings, and all the anti-Asian hate that is going on right now. We just had is very raw right now. I think I'm more emotional than normal today because I don't know if everybody's seen, but there is 2 more pretty bad, very graphic videos circulating of anti-Asian hate happening. And it's really interesting because I started writing in 2019, and it's kind of been a culmination with Black Lives Matter, with the pandemic, with anti-Asian hate. Like, everything is it good or bad that it's given me so much material, and it's really personal. Writing is personal. I think that's why we're all here, to share our stories and our points of view. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just hold space and say we need to move away from the colonized view that we shouldn't have emotional reactions to like human devastation. So please be emotional, Michelle. Like, I don't want to start crying because I'm vain and my makeup's gonna run, but like I am struggling not to cry because it's something so that's my dark comedic relief, but it's necessary. Like, who are we as human beings if we hear about these things and we don't become emotional? And how is that something to be proud of, that we can't even have a basic level of empathy, that we don't feel devastated and outraged when we see so many levels of inhumanity that seem so brazen, So also as women, we are constantly in our writing and in our lives being told to suppress that reflex as if it's something to be ashamed of, when really it's the antidote to a lot of violence within the patriarchy that is perpetuated specifically by not being empathic. So I just want to hold space and honor you mentioning that. Yes, I know I'm aware and I saw it, and you definitely didn't have to bring it up, but I'm glad that you did. And yeah, it deserves all of the emotions for sure.
So I think I talked a little bit about this earlier. I had some pushback about you should be saying this, or your character should be like this, the pushback that I was getting, and that the fact that I was being pushed to self-identify. And, one of the things that it pushed me into is I became education chair for Henderson Writers Group. And one of my most triumphant moments was with helping other people with their journeys. There was a request for people who were asking, how do we write diverse characters? How do we do it without being offensive or resorting to tropes? So it was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but I was able to collaborate with Henderson Writers Group and the LGBTQ Center and Nevada Humanities and local literary citizens in order to host a 5-hour workshop and panel on crafting diverse characters for inclusive literature. We don't live in a homogenous society. Our books should reflect that. Unless you live someplace where everybody really is exactly the same, which usually isn't the case, and certainly probably not anyone on this.
Sounds creepy, and you might want to leave also. That's the beginning of a horror movie, I'm pretty sure. It sounds Stephen King-ish.
Right. I mean, I understand some people are afraid to even attempt writing about people who are different from them because they don't want to be offensive. But you also want to be authentic in the world in which you live. It doesn't make any sense. I love Lord of the Rings, but it doesn't make any sense that none of the people cast in that could have been of color. Like, it just doesn't make any sense at all. It's not.
We could have a whole other topic talking about Afrofuturism and, lack of BIPOC characters in fantasy. And I think the best comment I saw in that, in one of the Twitter fights that happened when people were talking about Game of Thrones and not just the writing there, but the casting, is when people were saying, if you want to know how Eurocentric minds imagined a future, basically imagine a social future, look at Game of Thrones, only white people are in it. And it was the implications of it were so profound, but then you saw Asian and Hispanic and everyone else. And, people were bringing up historical memories of gender. I see somebody bringing up Bridgerton. I'm trying to ignore the chat. Yes, that is something about Bridgerton that was lovely. But, that comes from representation because that's from Shonda Rhimes. And so under what other circumstances would we have seen something like that happening? Or what's the show that's written that, oh my goodness, now I'm forgetting her name, super prominent Asian actress, and I'm just having really hardcore mom brain right now. And she's playing the chair of
Sandra, the chair.
Yes,
the chairman, isn't it?
That's right. It's the chairman. And so in those situations, when would that have happened unless people who represented those identities were actually, first of all, it isn't fantasy. Black people were in England during that time, right. And all the way up into from the royalty to the stable boys, they existed, they were there because the Moors had been there for 800 years. But the level of erasure that's going on is historically reductive in people's writing, both in the past and on TV. So all of that to say, yes, that's such a valid point that I wanted to mention. Is that something you're going to do again? I'm sure people would be interested.
Well, that's the thing, because I did this thing, it inadvertently added to my platform. I wasn't doing this thing for me. I was trying to help my community. But as a result, I've spoken on it on multiple conferences now. And I've been asked to do people's podcasts and talk about this thing. It became one of my platforms because I was helping my community.
Do you edit for it? I feel like that's something, I feel like this is a place where someone who
I do, I'm an editor and I'm a sensitivity reader.
For that specifically? Okay. Because that is a resource for people to know. And I think that should really be utilized.
And bless you, Tanya. A sensitivity reader is a hard job.
It really is, but somebody needs to do it.
Yeah.
I'm a sensitivity reader, and it's I probably need blood pressure medication. The space between me reacting to what I'm reading and trying to be that person didn't mean that. They really didn't. Yeah. That's my confidence. That's me reminding myself the entire time.
And having finding the words to express to them that I know that you weren't attempting to be offensive. However,
right.
I honestly start with asking them what their goal was, because that makes the situation so much more, the outcome is so much more positive when I start with open-ended questions than when I come in and do anything.
And that's usually the question for any editing issue. That's usually the best question. What was your goal?
Tell me what you were going for in this passage, please, so that we
and
can
I can let you know if it was successful. Because
whatever you're doing here is not to where you want to go. So let's scale back.
Right.
Well, that's beautiful. I see, I don't know if it was Allison or Ashley, she was asking, how can we pay? Yes, people are asking to segue into practical tips, and that is the next portion. And I guess this would be one of them. There's a question about how people can pay to access this training or education. You don't necessarily have to talk about it now, but can I make a suggestion, Allison and Ashley? Can we have a resource list? And I'm even happy to participate in making that resource list, but it seems like a lot of the questions that I am seeing picked up in the chat would benefit from a resource list. So
We can absolutely.
I can give a quick answer though. Like you can
yeah, go ahead.
look for conferences that have this, when you see this on the class list, go to that conference, whether it's me or someone else teaching it. Make sure that you attend.
I think people wanted you though. It was very specific questions about you.
Well, then join my newsletter so that you can see when I am teaching these specific events. And then if you want me as a sensitivity reader, then you can just contact me through my website.
Yeah.
Okay,
wonderful.
Can I add to what someone just said, when you see, I think Tanya, you said when you see these things, these topics in a conference that go to those sessions, I think sometimes people think, oh, well, it's, how to write Black characters. I'm not Black. That's not for me. Like, you're human. You are breathing. It is for you. Understand that you don't know what you don't know.
And I think we're preaching to the choir here, because this
this
meeting today, it's about half as full as it usually is for Writers Bridge. And I think it's because those people probably think, oh, this isn't about me. Right. Our allies are here though.
That's true. That's very true. But I think to cap on that is that you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And so, like I said before.
Also, I think people who are not Black or not Asian, whoever they're talking about, the cost of trying to remove yourself for the sake of respect. And Adiba, you had mentioned this earlier, it results in erasure inadvertently. And so that's not your goal, because then you're writing a story that presents as if you don't interact with anybody outside of your own culture, right? And if that is your experience, then fine, that's your memoir and that's authentic. But if you live it, but you know what I mean? And I'm not trying to be tongue-in-cheek, that is some people's experience. Right. But most of the people we're speaking to now, as we've all mentioned, like, do you live in a city in the United States?
Right.
Really anywhere. Because in Europe, it's going to be, do you live in a place that has more than 100 inhabitants? Because that means that you've interacted with somebody who wasn't like you. Either they were different sexual orientation, they were different religion, they were different ethnicity. And so have courage, I think, is what I'm hearing from both of you. Instead of sidestepping the fear of doing something wrong, get the correct editors, have editors that represent the different levels of diversity in your book so that they can give you the appropriate feedback. And then I would say, instead of worrying so much about how you're portraying the other people, if you're talking about someone else, be clear that you're seeing them through your lens. So instead of projecting what you think the other person was doing, be honest, I saw this person as that. Because then you're representing the experience correctly. And instead of being prescriptive, do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a nuance here. And this is the point of sensitivity readers. Instead of writing a book as if your assumptions about the person that is being represented in the story who isn't you are correct, write the book from a place of vulnerability where you're revealing how your assumptions about the other people impacted your interaction. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's so much gray area there. And that's what I'm hearing you and Adiba talk about. And I think that people need encouragement to be courageous and to be transparent, right? When they're incorporating this into their storytelling. And that would be great progress to see. Okay, anybody else want to add anything, Michelle, before we move over to the practical questions? Anyone at all? Okay.
Someone said, but many people do only interact with people like themselves. Step outside of your box.
step outside of your box, not write about how you imagine other people to be, like go outside and interact with some other people who aren't like yourself before you write those characters, right?
If you're only
Expand your horizons.
Right.
Literally.
If you are a white, heterosexual woman and you identify as a woman, maybe, and that's all you interact with, maybe go meet other people. Join clubs that you wouldn't normally join. Go to places you normally go to. Make friends that don't look like you, don't sound like you, or not where you're from. So that's all I want to say. Moving right along, Elsie.
Thank you all so much for being here with us today. Thank you so much, Elsie, for this wonderful moderating. Thank you, Tanya and Adiba and Michelle. When we send out our follow-up newsletter, we will include a link to a resource list. And we'll also include the links for y'all's socials so that people can find you and hear more of what you have to say. Would you each leave us with one specific step that, whether we are a person of color or a person melanin challenged, one specific step that we could do today to help make the literary community more inclusive, a more welcoming place for your words and the words of the people that you are championing? Tanya, what can we do today?
You can find 5 people who identify as different from you, follow their work and repost it, support them openly so that other people can see them, increase their visibility.
Love it. Michelle, what's something we can do today?
This is something that I've done a lot. I know a lot of the writers here are already freelance writers who pitch and get assigned work from editors. If, introduce writers of color, BIPOC writers for those opportunities, make those connections. I know I've benefited from other writers doing that for me, white allies who have done that for me. And I really try to pass it forward, and I hope others do as well.
Love that. Adiba, what can we do? What's one step that we can do today?
I think one of the things I said was say our names in the rooms that matter, share our work. One thing that I do that I've made a commitment to with my work is when I get in the door, I hold it open.
Yeah,
it's not just me coming
Love
in.
that. Love that.
If you get in the door, hold it open for those behind you. Not just the ones that look like you, but all the other ones who have access to the doors. There is like not a glass ceiling, but a gatekeeper. Like that's a real thing. And if you get the keys to the kingdom, let some of us in too.
That is a beautiful thought for us to wrap on. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Elsie, for moderating, and for panelists for sharing your time with us. We invite everyone to join our next webinar in 2 weeks. The next Writer's Bridge will focus on video content and how you can monetize it, as well as using it across platforms. Ashley, anything you want to close with as we wrap up?
I just want to thank you all for being here and leave one last minute for Elsie. Elsie, what do you have as your one practical tip for us moving forward?
I was just going through the other questions that, it was a broad discussion. And so we dipped into a lot of different pots and seeing which important things I think were not covered. There was a practical application question about how to handle harassment and really aggressive trolling. And I feel like that's very important. This person was asking from a gendered standpoint. I'm going to open it up to all of the different intersections across that. I think Michelle really covered this. And Adiba also touched over, honestly, so did Tanya. But when she was talking about how important it is in those moments when it's not just your work that's being attacked, but it's your identity. It's literally, because we can leave a field, you can leave a career, you can change jobs, you can change places that you work in the world or a focus, but you can never leave yourself behind. Like, you're going to take yourself and every integral foundational part of your identity with you everywhere. And so I think finding your community as a writer is extremely important. Finding your communities, because we all have different identities that we associate with. Participating, and not participating in a way that's reductive, but where it's mutual aid. So you're giving to the community, they're giving back to you. Because once you've built that community, Michelle's experience of advocacy and support is what should happen, right? All I can say for that is the mutual aid and the community building across different spectrums of diverse identities is really the best defense, you know, for situations like that. And it also gives you the strength and the resources to, I've had to deal with this as well. Strength and the resources to find the powers that be who can help you either accomplish accountability or redemption, you know, or just building your self-esteem back up, or opportunities in places where your voice is more welcome, whatever the case may be. So I think that I want to make sure that all of the main things were touched on in our questions. And so I wanted to leave with that, especially since Michelle gave like a testimony about it.
Of that, thank you so much. Thank you for being here, everyone. If you can all unmute to say a lovely goodbye, and thank you to our panelists, that would be amazing.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be buying all your books.
Bye.